Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to cut right to the chase on a topic that I think really defines success or failure in any organization: accountability.
Hmm.
We've been looking at a really insightful new article from Phoenix Performance Partners, and our mission today is simple. We want to pull out the single most powerful shift you can make in your language.
A change you can make right now.
Exactly, one that can fundamentally change the whole culture around responsibility.
And this isn't just about tweaking corporate slogans or mission statements.
Mm,
We're really digging into the difference between a culture that's focused on punishment
right.
and one that's focused on actually solving problems.
Yeah,
And it all comes down to one little word, one question.
absolutely. The core idea in this research is that most organizations, well, they accidentally train their people to be defensive.
They do. They set up these unwritten rules that, incentivize hiding things.
We're going to show you why the difference between asking who and asking, say, what or how isn't just semantics. It's foundational. It's like the blueprint for trust.
Yeah. To set the stage, the source material asks you to do a little thought experiment. Just think about the next time a failure happens at work. A deadline gets missed, a client's unhappy, snowing breaks.
And just listen. Listen to the first question that leadership asks.
Almost inevitably, it's that one question.
Who's responsible for this? And that one word, the accusatory who, it just acts like an immediate poison in the room.
It really knows. Every single time a problem comes up, the organization is standing at a fork in the road.
Okay.
Path one is defaulting to that who question, which means you're looking for blame. Or path two, you consciously choose to ask what and how.
Which is about seeking solutions, ownership.
Exactly. The first path leads to a culture of hiding. The second one leads to a culture of learning.
So let's spend a minute on that first path, because I think you have to understand why blame fails before you can really escape it. When we ask who, what's the actual intent? And why does it backfire so badly?
Well, the intent usually is to assign punishment, or maybe just to clarify the org chart. Leaders think they're being decisive when they ask, who dropped the ball.
Who needs to be held accountable?
Right. But the outcome is the complete opposite of actual accountability.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the psychology gets so fascinating. Why is that defensive response so reliable, so predictable?
It's neurological. The sources, especially that Phoenix Partners piece, go right into it. The moment a perceived threat enters the room, and being blamed is a huge threat, our primal survival instinct just takes over.
You're talking about the amygdala.
The amygdala, yeah.
Yeah.
The brain's ancient alarm system. It hears who's responsible, and it interprets that as an immediate, almost physical threat.
So your brain literally shifts gears.
Instantly. You shift out of the neocortex, that's the part for, rational thought, creativity, problem solving,
Yeah.
and you go straight into survival mode.
And when you're in survival mode, your goal isn't to fix the project.
No, your goal is to survive the meeting.
But I do have to push back just a little bit here. I mean, surely there's a time when you need to know who is responsible for a failure, right? For training purposes, or to figure out if resources are in the wrong place.
That's a fair question, and yes, of course there's a place for an objective review. But it's about the language you use in that initial moment of failure. That's what sets the culture.
Ah, okay.
If your first impulse, your first question is who, you trigger that immediate defensiveness, and you will never get accurate data about what really happened. The cost of finding the person first is always higher than the benefit.
You find the person, but you lose the truth.
You lose the truth. Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. So once that fear response is triggered, we start seeing those classic coping mechanisms, even in a conference room. Let's talk about fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah, they're subtle, but they are completely predictable. The fight response is immediate blame deflection.
So when the leader asks who approved this,
Hmm.
someone immediately says,
That wasn't my department. Talk to finance.
Mm.
Or, well, if marketing had given us the data on time, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
They're just redirecting the spotlight.
okay, and flight is just as common, but maybe a little quieter.
Much quieter. This is the person who suddenly has to step out for an urgent call.
Or they say, I wasn't really involved in that final stage, just creating some distance.
Yeah, they want to be able to honestly say, I wasn't in the room when that decision was made. And maybe the most damaging of all is freeze.
Silence.
Total silence.
Yeah.
They avoid eye contact. They don't offer any input, even if they know exactly what went wrong, because the risk of saying something that might implicate them is just too high.
And the really terrifying thing is that in a blame culture, all of those moves are completely rational. They're self-protective. The incentive is clear. Never admit a mistake.
Never. The result, like the Phoenix Partners research points out, is that the organization gets incredibly good at one thing.
Hiding dysfunction.
Instead of solving it, they're basically running two businesses. The one that does the work and the one that manages the blame. And that second one is incredibly expensive.
So if who is the poison, how do we find the antidote? This is the transformation, right? The move to questions that build ownership.
It starts with an internal question. The most powerful one you can ask yourself is, how am I responsible for fixing or changing this?
That feels like a radical reframing.
It is. It grounds the whole conversation in agency. It stops that internal victim narrative of, this happened to me, and it forces you to focus on the one thing you can actually control.
Your own response, your own actions moving forward.
Exactly. You might not have caused the whole problem, but you are definitely part of the solution.
So let's look at the actionable vocabulary shifts from the source material, because this is what you, the listener, can start using immediately.
Okay, let's take a classic. The classic corporate deflection. That's not my job.
Right, which just shuts down all collaboration.
Yeah.
The ownership alternative is something like, here's how I can contribute to solving this.
See the difference? One closes the door, the other opens it. It recognizes the shared goal.
Here's another one. They didn't give me what I needed.
Externalizing the failure.
The ownership response is tough, but it's, I didn't secure the resources I needed before I started. It forces you to look at your own preparation.
How about this one? The problem's on the table, and someone asks, so who's going to fix this?
The ownership question is, what's my role in fixing this? You're immediately modeling that the responsibility is shared. You're changing the norm right there in the meeting.
And one last one, moving from that feeling of resentment to creation. Instead of, why didn't they tell us sooner?
You ask, how can I create better communication channels so this doesn't happen again? You stop being an observer of the problem and you start being a designer of the solution.
And that's really the core of it. Those shifts take you from judgment to commitment. And that gets us to what true accountability actually means.
Right, because most people hear accountability and they think punishment.
But the source material is really clear. True accountability is simply keeping an account. It's an objective record of results compared to promises. Did we do what we said we would do?
So when the answer is no, when you miss the target, what happens next is what defines the culture.
In support of accountability, it doesn't trigger a punishment protocol. It triggers a curiosity protocol. Instead of blame, the leader asks, okay, we didn't hit the target. What support do you need to succeed next time? What barriers can I help you remove?
That completely changes the risk for an employee, doesn't it? If I know that telling my boss I'm behind will lead to a conversation about support,
Instead of shame.
I'm going to raise that flag so much earlier.
Of course. When people trust that failure leads to support, they ask for help. They flag risks. They volunteer problems. You, as a leader, get clean, unfiltered information much, much earlier.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this language of ownership connects directly to professional integrity, to, honoring your word.
Right. Integrity isn't just hitting a deadline no matter what, even if you had to cut corners. Real integrity is being honest about the reality of the situation. It means if you realize you can't deliver on Friday like you promised.
You have to renegotiate that commitment before you break it.
And that is so hard to do in a blame culture. It takes real courage to go to your manager and say, look, I gave you my word. I'd have this report by Friday. I now see that's not going to happen. Can we agree on Monday at noon instead?
That renegotiation is the ultimate act of integrity. It maintains trust.
And this is the great fork in the road for a culture. A blame culture punishes that. The manager says, you committed to Friday. Figure it out.
And what does that teach the employee?
Never bring me bad news early. Hide it.
But an ownership culture rewards that transparency. The response is, thank you for the early warning. Monday works. What do you need to make sure Monday is solid?
The whole organization benefits from that early warning. And the language reinforces the behavior you want to see.
Okay, so let's make this super practical. If you're listening and you realize, my instinct is to ask who, how do you start to make the shift?
It doesn't have to be some huge company-wide initiative. It starts with you in your next conversation. Just start by noticing the instinct.
The impulse to assign blame to a person.
Just notice it. That's your mental pause button. And then consciously replace it. Don't let who come out of your mouth. Instead, ask what or how.
What happened in the process? Or, my favorite, how can I support you in resolving this?
And if you're in a position of influence, the most powerful thing you can do is model it yourself. When something goes wrong, step up and say, Here's how I contributed to the situation, and here's what I'm committing to do differently.
And when you do that, you can literally watch the tension leave the room. People who are bracing for the blame game will just relax.
The energy shifts from defense to problem solving. And that's how culture actually changes.
Yeah.
Not from a poster on the wall, but from the modded language of influential people.
So it all comes back to that choice. Every problem is a fork in the road. You can choose who, which starts the blame cycle. Fear, hiding, defensiveness.
Or you can choose what and how and trigger the ownership cycle. Curiosity, learning, and genuine engagement.
So what does this all mean? Look, problems are always going to happen. That's a guarantee.
But your choice of language, getting rid of who and adopting how am I responsible, that determines if those problems make your organization stronger or weaker.
We'd really encourage you to try this. In your very next problem-solving meeting, just commit. Only ask what and how questions. Don't let a single who slip out. And just notice the difference.
And then take that ownership idea and turn it back on your own culture. Ask yourself the biggest question from all this material. How am I responsible for creating a culture where people feel safe enough to surface problems early?
That question right there, that's the whole mechanism for transformation.